All right, housing discrimination has left a devastating legacy in the United States. The restrictions on people of color from purchasing property have denied entire generations lasting wealth. But the controversial practice of selecting neighbors by race or class is not in the distant past. It is not. Less than 5 decades ago, CBS followed one black couple's failed journey to buy a home in New Jersey. And Tony Dokoupil recently spoke to their daughter and filed this report.
And that's the end of a fairly busy day on the New York Stock Exchange.
1964 was a record-breaking boom year for the U.S. economy, and CBS followed along as one young couple tried to buy their piece of it.
His name is Corbett Rochelle. Since last July, he and his wife Sally have visited many real estate offices like this one.
The Rochelles knew exactly what they wanted, a 4-bedroom home in Bergen County, New Jersey, one of New York City's most desirable suburbs. And as it happens, the very same place where my grandfather had found a home just a decade earlier.
The Rochelle search began in the usual way with the local newspaper.
But as Corbett and Sally visited real estate offices and asked to see properties, they ran into a problem my grandfather did not. As CBS documented in this rare hidden camera footage, the Rochelles were repeatedly turned away.
So what do you have that you can show me today?
Nothing in this price range. Nothing at all.
And in case there was any doubt about the exact nature of this problem, CBS cameras also documented what happened when white home buyers were sent in to ask about the very same properties.
Let's take a ride. I'll take you over to one we have in the development and show you that.
What the Rochelles experienced was a practice known as steering, a way of excluding black buyers from white neighborhoods. Prior to the Fair Housing Act of 1968, it wasn't only common, but legal, and very often life-changing. So to find out what happened to the Rochelles and how it compared to the experience of families like my own, we tracked down Corbett and Sally's only child, Alicia, only 11 at the time, and asked her to re-watch that original report.
Not wanted.
It wasn't always easy.
I've wondered often as I've gone from one real estate agency to the other, if people realize the many embarrassing situations and questions that you have to go through as a Negro, sometimes even humiliating.
Do you recognize that expression on your father's face?
Yeah, it's disgust. Yeah.
Did he ever find the house?
No. We moved out of New Jersey.
Your family spent at least 6 months and up to several years with plenty of money looking to buy a home in Bergen County, New Jersey, and never did.
Nope. Nope, they sure didn't.
What that means is the Rochelles missed out on one of the biggest real estate booms in the country. Home prices in Bergen County have jumped as much as 6-fold, even after correcting for inflation. For families like mine, who were able to make the investment, that money has helped pay for everything, from my grandparents' retirement to Florida to the travel I did as a college student.
Push that top one over.
For Alicia and her own 3 kids, that kind of generational cushion just was not available.
There wasn't a whole lot planned for them. They had no insurance. It was, yeah.
Did you say your parents died with no money?
No money.
No money?
Mm-mm.
Wow.
And it's really sad, but, you know, it is what it is.
What do you do with the fact that this house that they could not buy in Bergen County is almost definitely worth $750,000 or even $1 million today, and your family doesn't have it because of nothing more than racism?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that we haven't had because of racism.
Yeah.
The house is just a very small part of it.
That's a lot of money, though.
It may be, but, you know, money's not everything.
So when you think of this whole story, and you think of your folks here who had all the money they needed to buy a home in one of the hottest housing markets in the country and were denied only because of the color of their skin, what kind of story is this?
I don't know. It's a story of our country.
And joining us now to talk about this is Tony Dokoupil. So, Tony, you know, what I loved about your story, and I told you this the day that it aired on CBS Mornings, is a lot of people think about this stuff and they think of it in terms, or they, in their minds, it's ancient history. It happened long ago and it doesn't have any bearing on me or my family. But the reality is that this is not ancient history. This is living history.
That's right, Vlad. And in fact, you've touched on what the real purpose of this story and the earlier story I did about my grandparents' experience in Bergen County. They're really stories about a word no one wants to use, an R word, and I'm not talking about racism, I'm talking about reparations. It took 40 years just to get a bill to move a little bit so we could study the question of whether there need to be payments made to address the sin of racism and then discrimination that followed. And when that's dismissed, and it's not a popular idea politically, when it's dismissed, it's often dismissed, to use that phrase you did, as ancient history. No one alive today is a slave owner, and therefore we can move on and just do better in the future. And what I realized in researching these stories, and what I hoped that viewers would be able to take away from this, is that we may still decide politically, for whatever reason, to do nothing, but we cannot pretend that the repercussions are behind us and ancient. They are now. What's powerful about this story is I'm talking about my grandfather. I inherited money from that man. That man got a house in an area that grew tremendously for white people who were able to get in there, and did not grow for the many hundreds, if not thousands, an unknowable number of Black people who were not able to get in there. And confronting that simple fact in this one county, which is, by the way, representative of all kinds of other counties around every big city in America, is an important thing to do. And once you point that out, I think then it's, you know, that this is what journalism is. You say, look, this is still leading to inequity. What are we going to do about it? And if the political process comes to the answer of we're not going to do anything, then so be it. That's the wisdom of American democracy. However, at least we're dealing with the actual facts.
Yeah, I mean, the ripple effects, as you described them, and as we saw in your piece, and as we saw in the previous story that you did, are far-flung, because you benefited from your grandfather's experience, and because of the benefits that you received, the privilege, your children, you're a father of 4, your children are going to benefit from that. And I think that's how sometimes people are not able to connect the dots, right? I mean, you would think that, you know, your little Eloise is as far removed from your grandparents' experiences in the 1940s, post-World War II area, but they are not. She is the beneficiary of what they were able to accomplish in the 1940s and 1950s. And in this other case, the family that was followed in 1964 for CBS News, their daughter, their living descendant, is, you could see that she has nothing from what her parents went through in 1964.
Right. So she inherited nothing from her father's estate. And her father's an interesting case study in somebody who had a lot of money. He was a wig salesman along with his wife for the Fuller Company, which is this massive Black-owned business in the mid-20th century. One of the wealthiest Black businesses in the country. He had lots of cash. He could have held 2 mortgages if he wanted to. And he wanted to invest it in a home in that area, wasn't able to. And his life went on a different course. They were able to buy something in Florida. And he started living differently. Fur coats, fancy cars, private school for her. His money went not into investments that accrue over time, but into things that no one could take away in the moment. And I think that's an interesting psychological reaction. But, you know, to your bigger point, the reason I think white people, I mean, this began as a white guy talking to other white people about, like, how come we haven't paid attention to this? And I think what's important to understand is when you look at this inequity on screen here, white families have X and Black families have Y. It's not an accusation against those white families. It's merely an invitation to say, take a look at this difference. Maybe your family didn't know. I'm sure that my grandfather my grandfather wasn't making the housing policy that led to him getting a mortgage and somebody else not getting the mortgage. However, he did benefit, and all these families that were able to buy in at that key moment, they all benefited. Doesn't make them bad people, but at a certain point, you have to acknowledge that you have benefited and ask yourself if there's something that needs to be done to correct the imbalance, which is not a matter of to correct the imbalance. I think that's the question. What are we going to do about it?
Well, I mean, I can just say that your reporting on this subject has been instrumental in opening people's eyes. And if people are made more aware of these inequities through your reporting, that is commendable. That is what you're doing about it. And I should also shout out your producer, Martin Finn, Jenny Kamen, and even your
Brian
former
Cunningham
PA.
edited this thing.
Huh?
And Giselle Thomas is the one who found Alicia, which. It was a whole big team effort, and I'm grateful to the show for giving it space. Although on the subject of space, we had a chaotic morning, the both of us, and so now I'm backed into this weird corner of our morning studio. And the reason I'm in this awkward lean is not because this is my preferred newsman pose, but because we've had to make do with what we could. This was a space available at the time available for us to talk. So
yeah, well, you look good doing it, man. So as long as you look good and your reporting is sound, that's all we need.
Tony Dokoupil, thank you, Vlad. I appreciate it.
Good to see you, my brother. Thank you very much for spending some time with us.
See you Monday, if not sooner.
Yes.